Let's talk about the best tips anybody can use to decrease their expenses while road tripping. Hi, I'm Kate, and this week I want to talk about how I cut back on expenses on the road so that I can travel longer. When it comes to road tripping, there's three big categories of expenses: your gas money, lodging, and food. Now, of course, there's also some other expenses like car maintenance, washes, oil changes, etc. And maybe you want to do some activities, excursions, things like that while you're on the road. But this week, we're going to focus on the three biggest expenses: gas, lodging, and food, and how you can decrease your spending on all three of those categories. Over the past 6 years, I've done a lot of long-term road tripping. I spent 3 months traveling in an RV travel trailer to a bunch of the United States national parks. I took a 2-month road trip up to Alaska this past summer, and I've also done a couple month-long travel trailer trips. Over the years, I've developed a series of strategies and techniques to try to keep my costs as low as possible so that I can keep traveling for as long as possible. So let's start by discussing how to cut back your expenses in the biggest category of spending, at least for my road trips: gas. Some of these tips might be a little more obvious, while hopefully others will be things that you haven't thought of yet. But let's get started. So number one, the easiest way to cut back on your gas money is to drive a more fuel efficient vehicle. There's a lot of different options for road tripping vehicles. And if you can camp out of your car, like a small fuel efficient vehicle, I definitely recommend it. But if you're on the road a lot, you might get a little bit tired of tent camping. So having a vehicle that you can sleep inside of is definitely a perk. Like I said, I've done motorhomes, travel trailers, and now I have my pop-up truck camper. And the pop-up truck camper is the most fuel efficient of that lot. So the motorhome that we were originally driving around would get from 8 to 12 miles per gallon. The travel trailer being pulled and towed typically gets 11 to 13 miles per gallon. And then the truck camper typically averages around 16 to 18 miles per gallon. So you can see that that's a huge improvement from when I was driving the motorhome around. So a fuel efficient vehicle. And then if you have someone who wants to share the trip with you, splitting gas is a huge benefit. So the more people you have in your vehicle, obviously, the cheaper gas is. Now, for me, I solo road trip a lot, and so it's not always possible to split the gas, and that's fine. There are definitely other strategies to try to keep your fuel efficiency high and your gas expenditures low. One of the things that I do in my truck camper to try to keep gas mileage as high as possible is I drive slower. Driving from Minnesota, there are a lot of interstates before I hit some of the really remote and beautiful places that I want to head. And so those can be 75 to 80 mile per hour speed limits on those roads. I don't go that. I max it out at 65 miles per hour in this truck. It can definitely go faster, but I try not to. Anything over 60 really starts to hurt the gas mileage on the truck camper setup. If I can stay 55 miles per hour or lower, the truck is much happier. So I definitely try to go slower speeds and avoid interstates when at all possible. And then also knowing when to use cruise can be pretty helpful. So having cruise control on while I'm in the flat plains is fantastic because it prevents me from picking up speed unintentionally, right? I set a nice low speed, I stick with it, stay in the right-hand most lane so everyone can get around me, and I just sit there and cruise. But then once you get to mountains and hills, taking off your cruise can definitely improve your gas mileage. And on the note of improving gas mileage, another important factor too is making sure that your tires are well aired. Sometimes when you have a vehicle that's designed to do a little bit more off-roading, you might be changing your tire pressure for different scenarios. But when you're on the interstate, make sure that your tire pressure is adequate and good. If you have your tires underinflated, you're going to be spending a little bit more on your gas money. But those are all ways to try to increase your fuel efficiency of your vehicle. The other side of the coin is try to decrease your gas expenses. And so one of the best ways I found to do this is to look at gas prices ahead. So a lot of times Google Maps will show the gas prices at different stops. And so you can just open up Google Maps and search for gas stations ahead of you and just check. Sometimes there can be a 30 cents or more difference per gallon at the different gas stations if you just drive 20 minutes further, or maybe stop 15 miles earlier, or just drive an extra mile off the road to get to something that's not a travel center right on the edge. So checking those prices ahead of time can help. There also are some apps you can download on your phone that are designed to specifically do this. And so Gas Buddy, Gas Guru, those are both good options. I personally haven't used Gas Guru, but I've had Gas Buddy on the phone before, and it's fantastic. It helps you search and look for the gas prices. Again, since Google Maps added a lot more of that, I haven't used Gas Buddy as much, but it is a fantastic resource. I'll put the link for it in the description box below, and you can definitely go ahead and try an app like that. But trying to fill up at cheaper gas stations can make a world of difference, especially if you're heading into more remote areas. And so this is another thing to consider, is whether or not you should consider adding a jerry can to your road tripping setup. So jerry cans are just essentially fuel canisters that you can mount on your vehicle or trailer or things like that. And you can fill them up with gas, and there's definitely different sizes. And a lot of people will use this when they're going to more remote areas, because like the further you get away from populated areas, the more expensive gas tends to be. When I was driving on the Dalton and the Dempster, the Dalton was getting up to $5 per gallon, and the Dempster was probably north of that. Obviously, that was in Canadian dollars and per liter, so it's a little bit harder to directly compare. But gas in Canada was expensive, and it was even more so as I got further and further north towards the Arctic Ocean. I noticed on the Dempster, a lot of people had jerry cans that they likely filled up long before they got to that remote road. And so then they had cheaper gas with them, and they didn't have to stop at those remote gas stations and pay the premium price. So carrying a little bit of gas with you and filling up even more when you find those low prices can help keep fuel costs down. When I drove up to Alaska and Canada, I did about 11,000 miles on that road trip, and it was almost $3,000 in gas. So anywhere you can save on that is fantastic. I currently just have a small gas can that I fill up when I'm worried about having too much space between stops. And I need to get a jerry can that I can mount on the outside of the truck. So that's one of the upgrades that I plan to do soon to hopefully save on gas mileage. All right, the second category, lodging. My simplest answer to saving money on lodging is to consider camping as much as possible. I've definitely stayed in hotels on my long road trips, and I don't have a problem staying in budget hotels. If you're staying in budget hotels with a dog, just be aware that Motel 6 and Red Roof Inn both do not charge extra pet fees, but otherwise you're normally going to have a $20 a night extra pet fee tacked on. So just keep that into consideration when you are booking a hotel stay with a pet. But staying at budget hotels definitely works. If you're going to stay at a hotel, I try to avoid staying at hotels on the weekend. It's a lot cheaper to stay midweek most places than it is to have a Friday night or a Saturday night hotel stay. So if you're not needing to do every night in a hotel, then picking and choosing some of the lower price nights, and also choosing to stay in a hotel in areas that are less in demand can definitely help. I've found many a hotel stay for $60, $70 a night, as long as I'm outside of peak times and peak places. You're definitely not going to find something that cheap if you're going to go to a popular place like Banff National Park during the summer. But if you like to camp and you have a tent, or you have a motorhome or a travel trailer or a pop-up truck camper like I have, then it's really easy to just pull into campgrounds at night. And there's a wide variety of campground types. Avoid RV parks, and most of the private-owned parks are a little bit more expensive. So I really like to stay to state and national campgrounds. They tend to be a little bit more budget-friendly. And then when I can, I really like to stay at free campsites. So if you have a setup for overlanding or boondocking, those free sites are the best. There's a lot of different ways to find them. Personally, I use freecampsites.net fairly regularly. iOverlander is another good app to help you find those campsites. Now, some of the campsites might be a little more crowded or have other drawbacks to them, but those websites, freecampsites.net and iOverlander, do a fairly good job of having other campers leave reviews to kind of tell you what to expect. And for a lot of the popular road tripping routes, like going up to Alaska and Canada, there's a lot of really nice free campsites along those roads. Just be respectful and make sure that you're parking somewhere that's really legal. When in doubt, skip it. If you don't feel safe, skip it. And then there always are store parking lots too. So some restaurants and stores will allow you to stay for free overnight. I don't like those as much. I prefer to be out in nature on my road trips, but keep them in mind. They'll be listed on those freecampsite.net, iOverlander sites. But some of them are starting to allow less of that. So just be aware, like Walmart's used to almost always be able to stay at overnight, and you can't do that at all of them anymore. So make sure you're respectful of the specific places' guidelines. When I drove up to Alaska, I spent almost $50 a day on gas, even trying to use all my tips and tricks that I listed above. But for lodging, I was able to keep things down to an average of $17 per night. So I was pretty happy with that. And that was with a mix of a few hotels, several paid campgrounds, and then free campsites. So $17 a night, not too bad, but you can make that even less if you take out the hotels and do more of the free campsites. And finally, let's talk a little bit about food. So when it comes to food, everyone's food budget is different. And I definitely don't want to be telling anyone that you shouldn't be eating out or spending more money on food. If the joy of your road trip is to spend time in new places, trying out new foods, don't cut yourself short here. But for me, I tried to keep my budget fairly low. I would eat out occasionally with friends, and I will occasionally get a fancy coffee or a drink or things like that. But I tried to keep my food budget pretty low. And for my Alaska road trip, my food budget was under $15 a day. To make that happen, I did a few different things. One, I tried to grocery shop at budget stores like Walmart and Aldi's, places that I knew the prices fairly reliably. And then I also tried to shop as much as I could in bigger cities rather than in small towns, as a lot of times the small towns have a little bit more of a premium on grocery prices, as it takes more effort to get the food out there, and the really budget stores don't often operate in the small towns. So when I was in a bigger city, I would go to budget stores when I could. And then I had an electric cooler so that I could keep everything cold, so I could get a week of groceries at a time and keep it cool. And that way I had food that I could make out of the back of my car. I met one couple on the Dempster Highway that really took the food saving to the top notch. They bought a ton of canned goods and things like that when they were back in their home city. And then they hit the road and didn't have to buy much of anything when they're in the remote area, like the Dempster Highway. Because again, food prices are at a premium as you get so far into those remote areas. So they saved a ton of money by just packing canned veggies and canned fruits and a lot of non-perishable items that they could eat all those things on the road, be set to go, but not have to pay the premiums. I personally bought a handful of items in Dawson City in the Yukon, and it was pretty pricey. So I just got the bare minimum of what I needed, tried to get the rest of it before I got up there. So prepare ahead of time with your food. Try to shop at the cheaper stores in areas where there's more budget prices, and plan ahead. And so you don't have to spend high prices on your grocery items. I'm used to spending, $1 to $2 on cereal because I buy it on sale. And then, when you get to remote areas, you're looking at $6 to $7 a box of cereal. And the same thing's kind of true with like salads and fruit. The prices will be 2 to 3 to 4 times more in certain areas. So plan ahead, have a way to keep your food from spoiling. And if you don't have an electric cooler or a fridge or something like that, just try to get more non-perishable canned items can be a great option to try to keep food prices down. All right, I hope those tips will help someone on the road save some money. I love road tripping, and if you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you do too. And the cheaper we can keep each of our vacations, the more we can do it. If you have any really great money-saving tips for a road trip, let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear more tips and tricks for saving money on the road. I'm very budget conscious, especially when I take extended time off because I'm not always working as much during those time periods. And so any tips are wonderful. So let us know below what your favorite road trip money saving tip is. We'd all appreciate any extra money saving tips. Thanks for watching.